This video is part 4 in a series of how to build, install a ground level deck using tropical hardwoods as your decking material. This video opens with sort of a view of the tools that are pretty helpful to have in making this happen, of getting the deck boards installed. So let's go through what we've got here. We've got a dedicated drill driver and a impact driver. Installed on the drill driver already is something called a smart bit, and you might want to pick one of these up either at your specialty supplier. This is a number 7 smart bit right here, and kind of works by having a drill bit and then a collar here that spins. You'll know when you've reached the proper depth. And the key feature in here, and I'll point out with my pencil, there's a little blade right here that will recess the head of your screws in there. Anyhow, you want to make sure that when you pick this up that you get some replacement bits as well. These are prone to breaking if you torque them at all when they're in the hole, or if you just knock them, these blades, the bits will break. So you want to make sure you pick some of these up so that you don't have your installation day go to pot here. So again, these are the number 7 smart bit replacement parts. So we'll put these away here. Also, you want to make sure that you get yourself a big bucket of stainless steel deck screws. You want to shop around for these because these run, the prices vary wildly, and I find I do enough of these installations where if I get a giant bucket of these, it's a significant cost savings, and it really and this is what cuts into your the cost of installing a deck, because these are expensive if you buy them in small boxes. So what we got here, we got Deck Fast brand. They're 305 stainless, so they're for non-coastal applications. You'd want to get, I think it's 315 if you're doing these anywhere near the coast, but we're not near the coast here. And again, these are a number 7. You want to get at least 2 1/4 inches long when you do these things. And the key thing is that this uses a T15 star drive, which is as small of a, I've gone with a smaller T head on these before, and you break these bits. This isn't what you want breaking on you. I mean, if these are breaking on you, then you're getting too small of a head on these. But anyhow, again, get the biggest bucket that you can afford if you think you're going to be doing multiple projects. This is 3,000 screws, and I think it was $180 or something to get that. So for a trim head screw, and again, here's a close-up of what a trim head screw looks like. And it's got, you can't really see them very well in the video here, but there's little knurls on the side of this that help dig its way down into the deck board. So let's get with it. As you may recall from the prior video, we talked a little bit about some of the framing that you're constrained with of the ground level deck. If the span is long from the house out to the outer edge of the deck, and in this case it's 14 feet, you can't run a single span out there. You got to have an intermediate beam. Well, being ground level, it means that one of your deck boards at least is going to have to sit on top of a beam. I spent an inordinate amount of time measuring carefully from where this beam is located back to the house, such that I knew that I'd have a deck board sit perfectly on top of the beam. And you ask, well, why do you do that? Well, if you don't do that, you have a deck board sitting over the beam, and then you've got a channel that junk collects, leaves and other debris that's really hard to get out. So I've made it, I've already got this board already all screwed down in place. I've laid it perfectly on top of that beam. And if you remember from the prior video, I talked about how we routed out a groove on the top of the beam here, and you can see there's a intermediate support right here, and then it's routed out, and then we're back to where the joists are. So there's a definite air gap. You can see, right, you can see the air through there that covers most of the length of this beam, and that will protect this board from cupping and damage that will have you back for a callback in a heartbeat if you're a commercial contractor doing this. So let's go ahead and get the next board lined up. Something I forgot to mention in this is other tools that you want to have available to you. Is you can either make them, or it's convenient for me, I buy boxes of these spacers, and these are 1/4 inch spacers that I use for both cedar decks and for tropical hardwoods, other folks may choose a different gap. You don't want to get the gaps too tight, or again, water doesn't go through well with debris that gets stuck up in there. It's a kind of a compromise between having it tight enough to where it's a useful deck surface, but a big enough gap to where debris can fall through and you get good air circulation. While we're at it, and I'll talk about this while we're getting this next board into place, you ask, well, how do I select the lumber that we're going to use for our decking material? Well, in this application, I've worked with to do 5/4 by 4 inch, which the actual measurements are 1 inch by 3.5 inches. And really important when you're doing this, if you're doing hardwoods, and I would say it's probably the same for cedar as well. If it's ground level and you've got any potential issue for any moisture residing in the soil down below for any significant part of the year, you want to go to the 4-inch material and skip the 6-inch boards that most people do for decking, for above ground decking. I'll repeat that. Go with the 4-inch. You get much better air circulation. You'll get roughly twice as many gaps for your deck boards, and that's a chance for these boards to dry out. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we're in the Portland metro area in Portland, Oregon. The soil here stays wet for at least 6 months a year, and that's a constant source of moisture coming up from below that you just don't get a fair chance for these deck boards to dry out. So feel free to send comments if you have an opinion about this or if you got questions about it, but anything that's ground level and that's below 30 inches or below, I'd strongly recommend you go with the narrower and thicker deck boards. They're more stable. You get the 5/4 for a deck like this. You might spend a couple $100 extra in materials to get the thicker boards, but these will hold up better over time. So let's get to it. In this instance, we're going to put a 3/4 inch fascia board to cover up this PT, and the client wanted a 1-inch bullnose. So simple math, 3/4 of an inch plus 1 inch of bullnose. We got to get these out at 1 3/4 of an inch. And you'll see that we are at 1 3/4. I've already got that evened up with the prior board that's screwed down. And this will be a little bit of a challenge to do with one hand here, but you want to go through and get your spacers in play. And if, with a little bit of luck, these boards are straight. They're not always going to be that way, but I certainly picked the straightest board of my bunch to lay down for the first one, just to make that real easy. And that's the benchmark which all my other boards are going to go by during the installation. So every once in a while I'll verify, I'll measure back to the house to make sure that we're good. I've taken my speed square and I've marked it at 3/4 of an inch from the edge on both sides. So here we're out here at 2.75 and at 3/4. I've gone ahead and I've, just in case, I've marked both sides of my speed square. Put a pencil mark here and here. You can use a Sharpie if you want, but you want to be consistent in how you do this. So I'll just take, making sure the ends are matched up here, and I'm not going to work out at the very outer joist right now, but I'll line it up with the screws from the preceding deck board that got installed and make a little pencil mark, just like that. And we'll come in with our drill with our smart bit installed in it, and we will go down until the bit stops, until that collar stops spinning, which means that we've bottomed out the drill for that. All right, and you see the holes are left behind. It's left a little recess here, which the screws are going to snug down nicely into. So again, here's our number 7 2¼ inch minimum screws. Get this. Oops. Hard to do this with one hand, but we'll make sure your deck board is snugged up against that spacer. All right, and you get those screws to sit just below the surface in the event that you've already come back and Someday put a sander on here or whatever. It's nice to have those screw heads just below the surface a little bit. All right, so there you have it, and we'll repeat as necessary as you go across. There's various tools that you can do to either, the easy one is spreading the gap out so that's wide. If your board is curved in towards the adjacent board, you can put a pry bar in there or a wood chisel. If it's going the other way and it's a recalcitrant board that doesn't want to go, you can use a bow wrench. We do that a lot with long runs of cedar. It can become an issue. With the 5/4 Batu, it's a little bit easier to work with than Ipe. Ipe doesn't want to bend. You'll end up having to get your bow wrench. You can also tack in a board here with a couple of deck screws, and you can pry it from the other side with a pry bar. There's various tricks, and you want to be able to, whatever you do, you just want to be able to be expeditious in doing it, because you got a lot of boards to put in, particularly if it's a 4-inch nominal material here. You're drilling a lot of holes and bending a lot of boards. So the 4-inch stuff is easier to bend. So there's the upside. Bending these things into a straight fashion is not as big of a deal. So any questions or comments? You might have different tricks that you use, either as an experienced home installer or a commercial contractor. I'm always happy to learn others' tricks. These are just what I've come up with over the years to ensure success and be able to do this in a pretty expedient fashion. Thank you.